My name is Lily, and I'm 23 years old. I live with my parents, and after years of sleepless nights, last-minute essays, and caffeine-fueled breakdowns, I'm finally about to graduate from college. Life should be exciting right now, a time of freedom and possibilities. But instead, it's a frustrating mess, thanks to my older sister Olivia and her 4-year-old twins, Max and Leo. Olivia is 30, married, and lives across town with her husband Aaron. You'd think having her own house and a partner would mean handling her own childcare, but in our family, things don't work that way. Ever since the twins were born, I've been Olivia's default babysitter. It started off small, just an hour here or there when I was a college freshman. I remember the first time clearly. Olivia showed up at our house, twins in tow, her voice sugary sweet, but urgent. "Lily, I have an important meeting, just for an hour, okay? I promise I'll be right back." I agreed, figuring it was no big deal. 1 hour turned into 2, then 3. When she finally returned, arms full of shopping bags and a guilty smile on her face, I realized I had been played. "Thank you so much," she gushed. "You're such a natural with them." That day set the pattern for the next 4 years. Olivia would drop off the twins whenever she needed to run errands, go to appointments, or, as I quickly realized, simply take time for herself. Sometimes it was for a few hours. Other times, entire weekends. "Liv, I have midterms coming up," I protested one Saturday when she showed up unannounced. "I really need to study." "Don't be dramatic," she scoffed, already dropping the twins' bags in the living room. "They mostly just sleep anyway. You can study while they nap." Anyone who has been around toddlers knows how ridiculous that statement is. Between feeding them, changing diapers, and stopping them from climbing furniture or putting random objects in their mouths, there was no such thing as free time. Studying became a joke. My social life evaporated. "I haven't seen my friends in weeks," I told her once after yet another weekend of babysitting. "What do you mean? You have plenty of free time," she replied, like I wasn't drowning in responsibilities. Then, in a sing-song voice, she added, "Isn't that what sisters are for?" That became her favorite phrase. Every time I hesitated, every time I tried to push back, she'd guilt-trip me with some variation of sisters help each other. According to Olivia, my classes, my homework, my future, none of it was as important as being there for family. Months turned into years, and I adapted as best I could. While my classmates were out making memories, I was learning how to write essays one-handed while rocking a fussy baby, and just when I thought things would get easier, they didn't. As the twins grew from helpless infants to energetic toddlers, Olivia's expectations only increased. "They're so much easier now," she'd insist. "It's basically like having little friends over." Sure, friends who demanded snacks every 5 minutes, threw tantrums over the wrong color sippy cup, and had the energy of caffeinated squirrels. Despite it all, I pushed through. After 4 years of juggling studies and surprise babysitting shifts, I finally reached graduation, and with it, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a trip to Italy with my best friends. We were at our favorite cafe, the one where we'd spent countless hours cramming for exams when Rachel brought it up. "We should do something before we all scatter across the country," she said. "What about Italy?" I suggested, barely daring to hope. The idea caught fire instantly. Phones were out, flights were checked, hotels compared. Within hours, we had everything booked. My grandmother had given me $5,000 as a graduation gift, and for the first time in years I was doing something for me. That evening, I came home practically floating. My parents had invited Olivia and her family over for dinner, and I couldn't wait to share the news. "Italy," Olivia's fork clattered against her plate. "When exactly?" "Second week of July," I said, still grinning. "We got amazing deals." Her expression darkened. "You knew Aaron and I were going on vacation that week?" I blinked, confused. "No, I didn't." "You absolutely did," she snapped. "You planned this on purpose, to make sure you can't watch the twins." My stomach dropped. "Olivia, that's not true. We just booked everything today." "Well, you need to cancel it," she said flatly. "Aaron and I have already made arrangements for our trip. We need you to watch the kids." "I can't cancel," I said, stunned by her entitlement. "This is my only chance to travel with my friends before everyone moves away." "Don't be ridiculous," she scoffed. "Your friends will still be around. My trip is more important. I haven't had a vacation in ages." I stared at her, barely able to believe what I was hearing. "Then hire a babysitter." She laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "A babysitter? I don't trust strangers with my kids. Besides, we're saving up for a house. We can't waste money on a sitter when you're perfectly capable." My hands curled into fists under the table. If you can afford a vacation, you can afford a babysitter. That's different, she snapped. Aaron and I need this time together. This trip is important for our marriage. Something inside me snapped. And what about me? My voice rose, shaking with years of frustration. I've spent 4 years dropping everything whenever you needed me. I've missed parties, study groups, everything because of your kids. I am not canceling my trip. Her face flushed an angry red. What am I supposed to do then? Mom and Dad are too busy. And there it was, the same manipulation, the same expectation that her needs came first. I looked at our parents. Dad stared down at his plate, silent. Mom shifted uncomfortably. You always do this, I said, voice low but steady. You act like I owe you free childcare just because we're sisters. But I'm done. I'm going to Italy. You're being selfish, she hissed. No, I said, standing up. I'm choosing myself. I walked away from the dinner table, heart pounding, ears ringing. For the first time in years, I wasn't giving in. I wasn't letting her guilt trip me into sacrificing my own happiness. For 2 weeks, the silence from Olivia was deafening. No texts, no calls, no sudden visits. It should have felt peaceful, but instead I felt the weight of an oncoming storm. I focused on preparing for my trip, determined not to let her ruin it. But then, the day before my flight, everything came crashing down. I had gone to the store for some last-minute essentials. I was gone for maybe an hour, but when I walked back through the door, something felt off. The house was eerily quiet. Then, from the living room I heard the unmistakable sound of giggling. My heart dropped. I rushed inside and froze. There, sitting cross-legged on the floor, were Max and Leo. In their tiny hands was my passport. And it was destroyed. I lunged forward, heart pounding, and snatched my passport from their small hands. My fingers trembled as I flipped it open, hoping, praying, that it wasn't as bad as it looked. But it was. Where my photo had been, there was now a jagged hole, the edges uneven as if someone had hacked at it with scissors. The pages were covered in thick, colorful scribbles, red, blue, green, purple, crayon marks overlapping the official stamps and visa pages. For a few seconds, I just stared, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. Then, everything inside me snapped. A raw, broken sound ripped from my throat, a scream so full of anger and disbelief that it startled even me. My passport! My voice was shaking. My passport, what did you do? Tears burned at the edges of my eyes as I turned toward the twins. They stared at me, wide-eyed and confused, as if they didn't understand why I was upset. A door slammed somewhere in the house. Seconds later, Olivia appeared in the doorway, her expression one of mild annoyance, like I had just interrupted her favorite show. Lily, what's with all the noise? She asked, crossing her arms. I could barely get the words out. Look what they did! I held up the destroyed passport, my hands still shaking. Look at it! Olivia's gaze flickered to the ruined booklet in my grip, then to the twins who were still sitting there, crayons clutched in their little hands. And then she had the audacity to sigh. Lily, you really need to be more careful with your things, she said, clicking her tongue like a disappointed schoolteacher. How many times have I told you not to leave important documents lying around? I felt the blood drain from my face. Are you serious right now? She shrugged. Kids are curious, Lily. You know that. If you just left it out, I didn't. I cut her off, voice sharp with rage. My passport was in my suitcase, in a zippered pocket, inside a folder. Are you telling me that 2 4-year-olds somehow unzipped my suitcase, dug through my things, pulled out a folder, and just happened to find my passport? All on their own? For a split second, something flickered in her eyes, but it was gone just as fast, replaced by the same condescending, patronizing expression she always used when trying to make me feel like I was overreacting. Lily, she said, voice syrupy sweet. There's no point in trying to place blame. Accidents happen. I took a step forward, shaking my head in disbelief. Accidents? My voice cracked. This isn't an accident, Olivia. This is sabotage. She laughed, actually laughed. Oh, come on. Now you're being dramatic. I felt something inside me snap. Dramatic? Dramatic? My voice rose with every word. Asterisk. You expect me to believe that my passport just magically got into their hands? That they just happened to cut out my photo? That they just happened to scribble over every single page? And let me guess, they found the scissors all by themselves too? I turned to the twins, who were watching the argument unfold, like it was some kind of live-action cartoon. Max, Leo, I said, trying to keep my voice even. Where did you get my passport? Max grinned, bouncing on his heels. Mommy gave it to us. The world seemed to tilt beneath me. What? My breath hitched. Leo, eager to be included, nodded enthusiastically. Yeah, Mommy said Aunt Lily had an ugly picture and we should cut it out. I heard a sharp intake of breath behind me. My mom. She said we could make it pretty with lots of colors, Max added, his little face lighting up with excitement. She gave us the big scissors from the kitchen, too. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the room. The only sound was the faint ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hallway. I turned back to Olivia. She had gone pale. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. They're just kids, she blurted out finally. They don't know what they're saying. But it was too late. I saw it in my parents' faces. Mom had one hand over her mouth, her eyes full of horror. Dad, who had been silent through so many of our past fights, was standing stiffly, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Olivia, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Tell me they're lying, she floundered. Dad, come on, they're just kids. You know how they make things up sometimes. Tell me they're lying, he thundered. The twins flinched at the sound of his voice. Olivia took a step back, her face white as chalk. I had never seen my father so angry. You deliberately destroyed your sister's passport, he said, his voice shaking with fury. You used your own children to sabotage her trip. Do you have any idea what you've done? I was just, Olivia stammered, but Dad cut her off with a sharp wave of his hand. Enough. His tone was final. I have spent years watching you take advantage of your sister, years of excuses, years of manipulation, but this, he pointed at the ruined passport, this is unforgivable. Olivia's eyes darted to Mom, as if expecting her to step in, to defend her. But Mom just shook her head slowly, her expression one of quiet devastation. I'm so disappointed in you, Olivia, she whispered. I don't even recognize you anymore. And just like that, Olivia realized no one was on her side this time. For years, she had gotten away with everything. She had twisted every situation, manipulated every argument, guilt-tripped me into submission. But not this time. Dad turned back to me. How much was your trip? I hesitated, still overwhelmed. I had $5,000 from Grandma, but the flights, the hotels, everything was already booked. I don't even know if I can reschedule. You're getting every penny back, he said firmly. And more. Olivia's head snapped up. What? Dad took a deep breath, his voice steady but deadly cold. That house fund we set aside for you? Consider it gone. What? No, Dad, please! Her voice cracked, panic setting in. Lily is getting that money instead. She can use it for her own apartment far away from your manipulation. Dad, you can't do that! Olivia was practically shrieking now. Watch me! Her face crumpled. I need that money! We're saving for a house for the twins! Dad didn't even blink. You should have thought about that before destroying your sister's passport. Actions have consequences, Olivia. Tears streamed down her face now, but no one moved to comfort her. For once, she was the one dealing with the fallout. And me? For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to believe was possible. Freedom. The house felt eerily silent after my dad's announcement. Olivia just stood there, stunned, her face wet with tears, her hands clenching and unclenching at her sides. It was like she was trying to come up with one last excuse, one final way to twist this in her favor. But nothing came. For the first time in her life, there were consequences. I can't believe this, she choked out finally. You're really choosing her over me? Over my family? Dad let out a sharp laugh, but there was no humor in it. You did this to yourself, Olivia. She turned to Mom, desperation in her eyes. Mom? She pleaded. You're just going to let this happen? Mom exhaled shakily, looking exhausted. What do you want me to say? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. That it's okay? That what you did wasn't cruel? That you didn't just try to ruin your sister's dream out of spite? It wasn't. Olivia tried, but Mom cut her off. Yes, it was. Olivia's breath hitched, like she'd been slapped. She glanced at the twins, who were now looking uncomfortable, their earlier excitement fading as they sensed the tension. Come on, boys, she muttered finally, her voice shaking with barely controlled rage. We're leaving. She grabbed their hands and yanked them toward the door. Max hesitated, glancing back at me. Aunt Lily? His voice was small. I forced myself to swallow the lump in my throat. It's okay, Max, I said softly. Go with your mom. His little brow furrowed, like he didn't quite understand what was happening. But then Olivia pulled harder, and they were gone. The front door slammed behind them. A heavy silence settled over the house. I sank onto the couch, feeling drained, my ruined passport still clenched in my hands. I stared at it, my vision blurry. The realization hit me all over again. I wasn't going to Italy tomorrow. The dream I had held on to for months. The one bright spot after years of being at Olivia's beck and call, it was gone. My throat burned, but I refused to cry. I had wasted enough tears on my sister. Dad sat down beside me with a sigh. "We'll fix this," he said firmly. "We'll get you a new passport, and you will go on that trip." I nodded numbly. "But not tomorrow." "No," he admitted. "But soon." I looked over at Mom. She was still staring at the door, her face unreadable. "Do you think she'll ever apologize?" I asked. Mom shook her head slowly. "Not for a long time." The next few days were tense. Olivia didn't call. She didn't text. There were no surprise visits. It was the longest I had gone without hearing from her in years, and yet, instead of feeling relieved, I felt unsettled. I wasn't used to the quiet. Even though I had spent years resenting Olivia's constant demands, now that she was completely gone, it felt surreal. For so long she had been the storm in my life, always sweeping in, making everything about her, and now nothing. But I wasn't stupid. I knew Olivia. She wasn't the type to just slink away and accept defeat. She was planning something. A week later, Mom got a call. I knew it was Olivia. The second Mom answered the phone. Her whole body tensed, and she walked out of the room without a word, taking the call in private. I could only hear bits and pieces from the hallway. "You did this to yourself, Olivia." "No, your father isn't changing his mind, because actions have consequences. I don't know what you expect me to say." "Then figure it out. I have to go." When Mom came back, she looked tired. "She wants us to forgive her already, doesn't she?" I asked. Mom rubbed her temples. "She wants Dad to reconsider the house money." I snorted. "Of course she does. She still doesn't think she did anything wrong," Mom admitted. "Then I don't feel bad for her," I said simply. "She made her bed." Mom sighed, looking down at her hands. "You know, she quit her job." That made me pause. "What?" "Apparently she's staying home full-time with the twins now. Says she doesn't trust babysitters." I almost laughed at the irony. "She's finally taking care of her own kids?" I shook my head. "Guess she should have thought about that before burning all her bridges." Mom didn't argue. Neither of us called Olivia back. Despite everything, my friends refused to let my dream die. "We'll reschedule," Sarah told me when I called to break the news. "It's not like Italy's going anywhere." I had protested at first, saying I didn't want to mess up everyone else's plans, but Rachel cut me off. "No way are we going without you. We'll wait. You just get a new passport." And so, I did. It took some time, but eventually, I had a brand new passport in my hands, and soon after that, we rebooked our trip. A few months later, I was finally boarding a plane to Italy. And the best part? Olivia wasn't even a thought in my mind. I was done being at her mercy. I was done living my life for someone else. For the first time in years, I was truly free. The wheels of the plane lifted off the ground, and as I felt the familiar pressure in my ears, I finally let myself believe it. I was going to Italy. No last-minute disasters, no surprise babysitting emergencies, no Olivia standing in my way. Just me, my friends, and the adventure we had planned together. I stared out the window as the city lights faded below us, feeling lighter than I had in years. It wasn't just about the trip, it was the fact that, for once, my life was my own. I had spent so many years putting Olivia first, always bending to her needs, sacrificing my time, my energy, my peace. And for what? So she could keep taking and taking, never once considering what it was costing me? But now I had drawn my line, and I wasn't looking back. Italy was everything I had dreamed of, and more. We wandered the ancient streets of Rome, standing in awe before the Colosseum, tossing coins into the Trevi fountain, and eating pasta that tasted like heaven. In Florence, we marveled at the paintings in the Uffizi Gallery and climbed to the top of the Duomo, breathless but exhilarated as we took in the sweeping view of the city. Venice was straight out of a dream, gondolas gliding through the canals, golden light reflecting off the water as the sun set. "This gelato alone was worth the wait," Rachel said one afternoon as we sat on the Spanish steps, our hands sticky from the sweet, melting treat. I laughed, snapping pictures of us all. "Look at us," I said. "We actually made it. We had waited, we had rebooked, we had paid extra fees to make it happen, but it had all been worth it. And the best part, for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't have to check my phone every few minutes, waiting for Olivia to summon me like a servant. No frantic calls, no passive-aggressive texts, no guilt-tripping about family responsibilities. For once, I was free. When I got home, everything felt different. Not physically. Our house was still the same, but the energy had changed. The silence that once felt ominous now felt like peace. Olivia hadn't been back to the house since the passport incident. She and Dad hadn't spoken since that night. Mom still called her occasionally, keeping the door open, but it was clear things weren't the same. "I don't think she knows how to fix this," Mom admitted one day over coffee. "She still won't take responsibility." I sighed, stirring my drink. "She never will, Mom. That's just who she is." Mom frowned, looking down. "Maybe. I didn't ask about the twins. I missed them, of course. They were just kids. They hadn't understood what was happening. But for now I needed space. And I had bigger things to focus on." Dad followed through on his promise. The house money he had once planned to give Olivia, it went to me instead. I used it to get my own apartment, a cozy 2-bedroom near the city center, perfect for starting my new job. Moving out was the final step in breaking free. No more unexpected babysitting shifts. No more obligations I never agreed to. No more waking up to Olivia barging in, dumping her kids on me, and vanishing. For the first time in my life, my space was mine. One evening, I was out with my friends for our usual weekly dinner. The conversation was lively, full of work stories, dating disasters, and future travel plans. At some point, Sarah turned to me with a smile. "So how does it feel? No Olivia, no twins, no chaos." I thought about it for a second. And then I smiled. "I finally feel like I'm living my life," I said, "not just being a background character in hers." And that was the truth. Sure, sometimes I felt a pang of sadness about how things had turned out, about the distance between me and my sister, about the fact that the twins were growing up without their aunt. But then I remembered that night. The ruined passport, the smug, calculated look on Olivia's face. She had spent years taking from me, and when I finally said no, she had tried to destroy me for it. I didn't owe her anything. She had lost a free babysitter. But I had gained something far more valuable. My freedom. Story 2. My world was a carefully constructed haven, built on the foundation of love and shared dreams with my husband, Mark, and our 2-year-old son, Leo. At 30, I felt like I had it all figured out. I was a freelance web designer, Mark had a stable job at my dad's company, and Leo was the sun around which our lives revolved. Our days were filled with the comfortable rhythm of family life, work, playtime, bedtime stories, and the quiet contentment of a life well-lived. Family dinners at my parents' house were a weekly ritual, a time for laughter, lively discussions, and the occasional bombshell announcement. My dad, a self-made man who exuded authority even in his casual attire, always held court at the head of the table. One evening, he dropped a life-altering revelation. "I've decided to expand the company. We're opening a new branch in the city, and I want Mark to lead the project." Mark, ever the eager and ambitious one, practically vibrated with excitement. "Mr. Thompson, that's an incredible opportunity. I'm absolutely in." A wave of pride washed over me. "That's fantastic news," I exclaimed, already picturing our family embarking on a temporary adventure in a new city. "We should all move there for the duration of the project. It'll be fun." But Mark's response was like a bucket of ice water. He hesitated, avoiding my gaze. "Actually, Sarah, it might be better if you and Leo stayed here. Moving could be disruptive for him." His words stung, an unexpected discord in our usually harmonious dynamic. "But Mark," I protested, "I thought we did everything together. It's not like we have to uproot our lives. I can work from anywhere, and it would be a nice change of pace for Leo." My dad, ever the pragmatist, chimed in. "Mark, Sarah has a point. The family should stick together, and Sarah's work allows for that flexibility." Mark seemed flustered. "I was just joking, of course. You both should come along." But the joke hung in the air, heavy and unwelcome, casting a shadow over the rest of the evening. Later that night, after Leo was asleep, I confronted Mark. "About dinner tonight," I began, my voice laced with confusion. "You really surprised me. Is there something you're not telling me?" He finally met my eyes. "Sarah, I didn't mean to upset you. Setting up the new branch will be demanding. I thought it would be easier for you to stay here. avoid the stress of moving. But we've always faced challenges together, I countered, searching his face for the reassurance I craved. Why would this time be any different? Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. You're right, we do. I guess I was just overthinking it. It was a silly thought, nothing more. His words were meant to soothe, but they did little to ease the unease that had taken root in my heart. Something had shifted. A subtle change in the familiar landscape of our relationship. Life, it seemed, had a knack for throwing curveballs just when you thought you had it all figured out. Our adventure was put on hold when Leo came down with a fever that quickly escalated into something more serious. Dr. Jacobs, our family physician, delivered the news with a grave expression. Sarah, I'm afraid it's more than just a cold. Leo needs rest and can't travel for a while. Moving is out of the question right now. I called Mark, my voice heavy with worry and disappointment. Mark, Leo's sick. The doctor advised against traveling. We can't join you for now. There was a pause on the other end. Then Mark's response. Calm, almost relieved. Oh, is it serious? Well, that's okay, Sarah. He needs to get better. We can manage. His reaction felt off, a strange dissonance that amplified the unease that had been simmering within me. Was it just my imagination? Or was there a hint of contentment in his voice? A subtle suggestion that he preferred us to stay put. The weeks that followed were a blur of worry and sleepless nights as I nursed Leo back to health. Mark's calls became infrequent, his words perfunctory, lacking the warmth and connection I yearned for. The distance between us grew, not just in miles, but in the emotional space that had once been filled with shared laughter and whispered secrets. Time, like a river, flowed on, carrying with it the fallen leaves of my hopes and dreams. Leo, thankfully, recovered, but the distance between Mark and me remained. His calls, once a lifeline, became a formality, his voice a stranger's. He spoke of work, of deadlines, of the pressures of his new position, but rarely of us, of missing us, of longing for home. One evening, as I tucked Leo into bed, the phone rang. Hey, how's Leo doing? Mark's voice was flat, devoid of its usual warmth. He's better, I replied, still recovering. We miss you, Mark. Yeah, I miss you guys too, he said, but the words were hollow, echoing in the vast emptiness that had grown between us. Work's crazy here, he continued, his voice distant, distracted. I've barely got a moment to breathe. I sat down on the edge of Leo's bed, the silence of the house pressing in on me. Mark, I began, my voice trembling. We barely talk these days. Is everything okay with you? You seem different. Different? He scoffed. No, I'm just busy, Sarah. You know how it is starting up a new branch. I understand you're busy, I persisted. But it feels like you're not just physically away. It's like, I don't know you anymore. He sighed. Sarah, you're overthinking it. It's just stress, that's all. Once things settle down here, it'll be better. But his reassurances rang hollow. The chasm between us widened with every passing day, an invisible barrier that no amount of words could bridge. Weeks turned into months, and Mark's brief visits home did little to mend the fractured connection between us. He was physically present, but emotionally absent, his attention consumed by his phone, his laptop, anything but me. One night, I couldn't bear the silence any longer. Mark, I said, my voice tight with frustration, we need to talk. You've been distant ever since you took this new job. Is there something you're not telling me? He looked up from his phone, his expression a mixture of annoyance and surprise. Sarah, why do you keep saying that? I'm right here. But you're not. Not really, I countered. You're always on your phone or laptop. It's like you're here, but your mind is somewhere else. He closed his laptop with a sigh. Look, Sarah, I've got a lot on my plate right now. The new branch, the pressure from your dad. It's a lot to handle. I'm just trying to do my best. I get that, Mark, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But we're a team, remember? If there's something bothering you, you can talk to me. He shook his head, a dismissive half-smile on his face. There's nothing to talk about, Sarah. I'm just busy, that's all. You're making a big deal out of nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was a gaping wound in my heart, a growing sense of isolation and betrayal that threatened to consume me. Then, one afternoon as I was working on a web design project, a knock on the door shattered the quiet rhythm of my day. A stranger stood on my doorstep, his eyes filled with a weary determination. Can I help you? I asked, curiosity battling with apprehension. Yes, you're Sarah, Mark's wife, right? I'm David. His voice was steady, but I could sense the tremor of anxiety beneath the surface. That's me, I said. What's this about? He took a deep breath. I believe your husband, Mark, is having an affair with my wife. The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. That's impossible, I stammered, disbelief clouding my thoughts. Mark wouldn't do that. There's got to be some mistake. I thought the same at first, David admitted, reaching into his pocket. But then I found this. He handed me his phone. The photos displayed on the screen were undeniable. Mark, my Mark, in a series of intimate embraces with a woman I didn't recognize. Their laughter, their closeness, their blatant disregard for their vows. It was all there, a cruel testament to their betrayal. My world tilted on its axis. Why are you showing me this? I whispered, my voice cracking under the weight of the revelation. David Quote's gaze was filled with a mixture of sympathy and resolve. Because you deserve to know the truth, and I think we should do something about it. A storm of emotions raged within me. Anger, betrayal, a profound sense of loss. What do you mean, do something about it? He leaned against the doorframe, his posture that of a man who had nothing left to lose. I have a plan, a way to confront them, to bring this out into the open. I can't just let this go, and I don't think you should either. My mind raced. Part of me wanted to shut the door, pretend this was all a terrible dream, but a stronger part, the part that refused to be a victim, knew I couldn't live with the uncertainty. What kind of plan? I asked, my voice barely audible. We need more evidence, David explained. Something undeniable. I propose we catch them together in the act. The idea was daunting, terrifying, yet it resonated with the primal need for truth, for closure. How would we do that? I know where and when they meet, he said. If you're willing, we can confront them together. The thought of facing Mark, of witnessing his betrayal firsthand, sent a shiver down my spine. But the need for truth, for some semblance of control in this chaotic situation, outweighed my fear. Okay, I said, my voice trembling but firm. I'm in. I need to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The weight of our mission settled upon us as David and I sat in the dimly lit apartment next door to Mark's. The irony was not lost on me. This apartment, provided by my own father's company, was now the staging ground for uncovering my husband's infidelity. David, his hands shaking slightly, set up a small recording device. Can't believe it's come to this, he muttered, more to himself than to me. I nodded, my stomach churning with anxiety. Neither can I, but we need to know, right? We waited, the silence punctuated by the ticking of the clock and the pounding of our hearts. Then the sound of a door opening next door shattered the stillness. That's them, David whispered, his voice tight with anger. We pressed our ears against the thin wall, straining to hear. The voices were muffled at first, then clearer. It was Mark, his laughter unmistakable, intertwined with a woman's, his mistress. The intimacy in their voices was like a knife twisting in my gut. Are you getting this? David asked, his voice strained. I nodded, holding the recorder close to the wall. Yes, it's all being recorded. The sounds from the other side continued. Laughter, conversation, and then, unmistakably, the sounds of passion. It was excruciating to sit there, listening to my husband betray our family so blatantly. But amidst the heartache, there was a growing sense of resolve. We were gathering the evidence we needed, undeniable proof of their deceit. After what felt like an eternity, the noises ceased, replaced by an oppressive silence. David and I exchanged a look, a mixture of sorrow and determination in our eyes. We have what we need, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Now we confront them. David nodded, his jaw set. Let's do it now. No point waiting. As we stood up, a strange sense of empowerment washed over me, mingled with dread. The life I had known with Mark was over, and confronting him was the first step into a new, uncertain future. We stepped out of the apartment and into the dimly lit corridor, our hearts pounding. The plan was simple. David would pose as a courier, a ruse to ensure Mark would open the door. He knocked firmly, announcing in a loud voice, "Delivery!" Footsteps approached from inside, and the door swung open. Mark stood there, his face a mask of surprise and annoyance as his eyes landed on me. "Sarah? What the hell are you doing here?" I took a deep breath, my voice steadier than I felt. "We need to talk, Mark. Can we come in?" Behind Mark, a young woman with startled eyes stood frozen. Reluctantly, Mark stepped aside, allowing us entry. The room crackled with tension, unspoken accusations hanging heavy in the air. Without hesitation, David launched into his prepared speech. "We know about the affair, Mark. You can drop the act." Mark's initial reaction was a mixture of defensiveness and scorn. This is nothing. She seduced me. I was just caught up. His mistress, now visibly shaken, retorted, "What? No, you were as much into this as I was." Ignoring her, Mark turned to me, attempting to downplay the situation. "Sarah, listen, this isn't what it looks like." I couldn't hold back any longer. "Not what it looks like? I heard everything, Mark. We have recordings." Mark's eyes widened as he glanced at the recording device in David's hand. "Recordings? Sarah, you've got to understand." "There's nothing to understand." I cut him off, my voice rising with anger. "You betrayed our family, Mark. You betrayed me and Leo." He started to speak, then stopped, the gravity of the situation sinking in. "Sarah, please." "Forgive you?" I scoffed. "You think I can just forgive and forget? I'm going to demand compensation for this betrayal. And yes, I will tell my father. He deserves to know the kind of man you really are." Mark's face crumpled, but there was no going back. The trust we had shared was shattered beyond repair. David, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. "You're going to pay for this, Mark. Both of you." The mistress, now in tears, looked utterly defeated. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." As we left the apartment, leaving Mark and his mistress to their own messy reality, I felt a strange sense of closure. It was painful, heart-wrenching, but necessary. The confrontation was over, and with it, a chapter of my life had closed. Stepping out into the cool evening air, the weight of what had transpired settled upon me. David and I walked in silence to a nearby park bench, the noise of the city fading into a distant hum. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Sarah," David said, breaking the silence. "But at least now you know the truth." I nodded, numbly. "Yes, the truth." I paused, gathering my thoughts. "What are you going to do now?" He looked down at his clenched hands. "I need to think. There's a lot to process. But one thing is clear. I can't stay with her after this." "I understand," I said softly, the reality of my own situation sinking in. "I need to start planning for a life without Mark, for Leo's sake." David looked at me, his eyes filled with empathy. "If you need anything, any help at all, just let me know." I managed a weak smile. "Thank you, David. I appreciate it." We sat there for a while longer, lost in our own thoughts, before parting ways. As I walked back to my parents' house where Leo was staying, the magnitude of the situation hit me with full force. My marriage was over, and the life I had known was shattered. When I arrived, my parents immediately sensed something was wrong. "Sarah, what happened? You look upset," my mom said, concern etched on her face. I sighed, unsure where to begin. "Mom, Dad, I found out Mark has been having an affair." The room fell silent. My dad's expression hardened. "Are you sure?" I nodded, feeling a lump forming in my throat. "Yes, I'm sure. I heard them, and I have recordings." My mom reached out and took my hand. "Oh, Sarah, I'm so sorry. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to file for divorce," I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "I can't be with him after this. It's over." My dad, ever the protector, spoke up. "He won't get away with this. I'll make sure of that. And you and Leo will always have a home here." Tears welled up in my eyes, grateful for their unwavering support. "Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you both." The final chapter of my marriage to Mark was written in a lawyer's office, amidst a sea of paperwork and legal jargon. The divorce process was grueling but necessary. I fought hard, with my lawyer by my side, to ensure that Leo and I would have the financial security we needed. The court granted me alimony and compensation for Mark's betrayal, a small solace in the wake of our shattered life. Meanwhile, David, the man who had been brought into my life by this shared misfortune, also finalized his divorce. His wife, once accustomed to a life of luxury, now faced a starkly different reality. She was forced to trade her affluent lifestyle for a job as a saleswoman in a retail store, a harsh consequence of her actions. As for Mark, the repercussions of his infidelity were far-reaching. My father, once his mentor and supporter, was ruthless in his response. He not only fired Mark from the company, but also made it clear that he would use his influence to prevent him from securing a position in any reputable firm. The man who once had a promising career now juggled two menial jobs, struggling to make ends meet. Life after the divorce was a journey of healing and rediscovery. I focused on raising Leo, determined to shield him from the pain and upheaval of our broken family. Watching him grow, laugh, and explore the world was a balm to my wounded heart. My work as a web designer provided not just a financial lifeline, but also a welcome distraction. I poured myself into my projects, finding solace and fulfillment in the creative process. It was a reminder that despite the chaos, I still had control over some aspects of my life. My parents were my rock during this time, offering unwavering support and a safe haven for Leo and me. "You're stronger than you realize, Sarah," my dad would often say, and as time passed, I began to believe him. In the quiet moments, often after I'd put Leo to bed, I would reflect on the tumultuous journey I had been through. The pain of betrayal still lingered, but it was slowly being replaced by a newfound strength and independence. I had navigated through the darkest of times and emerged on the other side, not unscathed, but certainly stronger. As I closed the chapter on a painful part of my life, I opened a new one, filled with possibilities and the promise of a fresh start. My journey was not over. It was merely taking a new path, one that I was ready to travel with hope and determination.